So, the newest 6.0 or Luna 1 version Stygian Onslaught has finally arrived, and in this video I'm going to show you how to beat the Drake, the Crab, and that Fatui guy by going over many different teams, including best characters you can use against each boss, and of course, I'll share some tips and tricks how to deal with those annoying boss mechanics. Now, keep in mind, I will be mostly discussing difficulty levels 4 and 5, also known as Menacing and Fearless. As for the Dire difficulty, this is mostly an account and gear check for players who invested in very specific characters. But the strategy tips I share for difficulty 5 Fearless still applies to Dire. And remember, the most important thing, energy is king in this mode. Favonius and sacrificial weapons are a blessing when you start fights with zero energy, and need to quickly build up relevant bursts. You might also need to use energy sands on some units if they struggle to get their burst up in a timely manner. But yeah, besides that, every single boss from difficulty levels 1 through 4 have exact same mechanics, and then afterwards for difficulty 5 and 6, they will gain another new mechanic, which I will cover in detail, although for now, let's take a look at our first opponent, the Aeon Blight Drake. Alright, so this robot chicken is exactly the same as the one you'd fight in open world, all the way through difficulty 4. So make sure to bring a bow user to knock it down, and remove that massive resistance they've gained against your strongest element. However, things become much more different once we challenge Fearless Drake, because now it gains a couple of new and very annoying mechanics. Basically, it immediately starts the fight on the ground, he won't go into his flying mode as long as you quickly reduce its HP by 25% increments. After the fight starts, you have about until 1 minute 20 second mark until he takes off into air, and if you fail to reduce his HP by 25% before that happens, he will permanently remain in air because this new mechanic states you can no longer knock it down via his exposed cores. So GG basically. However, that's not all. Whenever you reduce his HP by 25%, so this will happen 3 times total, he will gain a massive 200% resistance to the elements that dealt the most damage to it. So if you bring a hyper DPS unit and everyone else on the team contributes very little damage, essentially now you're also screwed because after that resistance gain, you need to quickly reduce his HP by 25% again, or else he will go up into air and yeah, you get the picture. So what does this mean? Long story short, in order to beat this difficulty, you need to build a team that has at least 2 elements which can equally contribute good amount of damage. So when he gains resistance to one of those elements, the other element can now help quickly reduce his HP. For example, I used this double Hydro, double Geo team made up of Farina, Yelan, Navia, and Shilonen. Yes, it's a premium 5-star team, but I'll quickly talk about other comps. However, the point is, if let's say after the first 25% HP reduced, the Drake says that he took the most damage from Navia, Geo now deals very low damage, and it's up to Farina and Yelan to pick up the slack and reduce the next 25% HP, and then if that happens, the boss gains massive Hydro resistance next, and then this way, Navia can start beating it up again, and then finally, it will gain Geo resistance, and the last 25% depends on Hydro units yet again, dishing out damage fast before the timer runs out. I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the most difficult boss of the 3, well at least on difficulty 5 and 6, because you basically have to bring 2 of your best damage dealers that have good enough synergy so they can still unleash very high DPS when the other one's element is super weak against the Drake. But with that being said, which teams or characters are best against it? Well, obviously Mavwika and Milani together turns this fight into a joke, more or less, especially if you bring Sitlali or another cryo applicator, so Mavwika can melt, and then when Pyro is weak, she can just provide pyro application for Milani to vape her attacks. Or instead of Milani, you could use Nuvilette together with Farina along with Mavwika and a support unit. Another team that does super well is Chaska, thanks to her Rainbow Bullets. A team of Chaska, Auroran, Farina, and Benny makes this fight very easy. Then, Skirk team with double Hydro, usually Farina and Yelan or Xingqiu and Escoffier, also pretty much makes this fight quite easy. However, you could also just play overloaded Chevy team. The most powerful one is going to be with Varessa and Mavwika together with Benny and Chevy, but you could also go for free-to-play variation by using Xiangling instead, although it will be a pretty tight fight to clear it on difficulty 5. Or on the flip side, you could also go for Kinich Burning team, strongest option being yet again Mavwika, but you could also use Xiangling instead. So a team of Kinich, Emily, Benny, and Xiangling should do the trick. Finally, if we go back to the basics, if you have really good artifacts, you could go for double Hydro with Pyro DPS team. So either Arlecchino or Hu Tao, along with Yelan, Xingqiu, or Farina if playing with Hu Tao. The last slot can be either Zhongli or Shilonen. Shilonen is obviously going to be much better than Zhongli due to buffs she can grant. But yeah, against this boss, the most important strategy is to have a team that can contribute damage equally from at least 2 elements. Now, let's talk about the Crab. after this quick message. Topping up costs a lot, and those numbers are always painful to look at. So if there was any way to bring those prices down, you'd want to hear about it, right? Well, luckily today's sponsor, LD Shop, can easily help you with this. They offer in-game purchases on multiple titles, but with a massive discount. For example, for Genshin, they have their character guarantee bundle that gives 180 pulls worth of currency. And if you're just looking to swipe in general, you can get top-ups that usually cost $100 in the US for just over $75, which ends up saving you over 20%. Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, the first top-up bonus will work from LD Shop, so you can get double Genesis crystals, but cheaper. And it's very easy to do it. Just enter your UID and server region and press top-up button. Within 5 minutes, the top-up will appear in-game. If you spend over $80 in 1 month, you can claim a free Welkin Moon. And if you register for LD Shop using my link, you get a 5% and 15% off coupons, which can be used to save up to $50 off. LD Shop has been a go-to place for thousands of players, and it's absolutely safe and secure for top-ups. So use my link to start saving and help support my channel. Alright, next we have Mr. Krabs. At the start of fight, it will leap into air and summon these seeds on the ground. You'll also notice Krabby Patty gains a shield. The only way to break it is by shooting back 6 of those seeds it generated, because if you linger for too long, he will then instantly defeat the active unit on the field. But yeah, to launch those seeds at him, you must trigger Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, or Lunar Bloom reaction. As you can see, these seeds don't take damage, but they become green and then get launched after Hyper Bloom reaction hits them. Once the crab is down on the ground, more seeds will keep appearing, so make sure to fight next to them, because if you trigger one of those mentioned reactions, they still get launched at the boss, and it will deal a lot higher damage due to some kind of formula where it takes original damage the seed received from the reaction and then multiplies it. So in short, always hug the boss where the seeds are and keep attacking it while the reactions launch those seeds at the Krabby. Now, it's very likely you won't defeat it in 1 or 2 rotations, so the boss will actually once again go into air, gain a shield, and summon a lot of seeds. Repeat the same thing as before. Make sure to launch those seeds with Bloom-related reactions or Lunar Bloom. Oh, and most importantly, at difficulty level 5 and 6, the seeds will now explode if they're hit by pyro attacks, dealing big damage and knocking back your active unit. So, sadly, this is where the Burgeon dream dies, because even 1 pyro application to the seed can sniff out your active unit. So yeah, just don't bring pyro units to difficulty 5 and above. But let's talk about teams and characters. The first one that comes to mind is Lauma. She absolutely trivializes this fight because, as you can see, even by just tapping the skill, not even holding it, since somehow those seeds have weird init Hydro Aura just for this case, this counts as Lunar Bloom reaction, and they're instantly launched against the crab. Whereas compared to Hyper Bloom, you need to apply Hydro, then Dendro, then use Electro on the Dendro core on the ground to launch it at the seed, which then flies off at the boss. What can I say? Hoyo made sure that Lauma thrives against this boss and makes it seem like a joke. Still, Nilo teams also have easier time against this boss due to blooms exploding super fast, and in general, blooms compared to Hyper Bloom or Burgeon just trigger more often and faster usually. So even without Lauma, Nilo Bloom teams are pretty strong here, but with Lauma, obviously this fight becomes almost a joke. Now, as for Hyper Bloom, any type of team that you'd normally use, as long as they can quickly build up energy if needed, should be fine. Like this classic team comprised of Nahida, Alhaitham, Xingqiu, and Cookie. Just make sure Xingqiu has a ton of energy, because even with Sacrificial Sword, I still gave him Energy Sands, since then at the start of the fight, his 2 skill taps can fully build up his burst, so I can then have his Hydra application generate the Dendro cores. Also, if you don't have Alhaitham, you can replace him with Kali, and she gets the job done pretty well. In fact, the rotations seem to be smoother with her. Or you could go for double Hydro with Xingqiu and Yelan and use Nahida on field to spam Dendro cores on the ground. Or if you want to use Hyper Bloom Raiden, then either Yao Yao or Baizhu could work as a healer to keep the team alive. Still, point is, this fight is doable without Lauma. It's just that it becomes much more challenging because it takes a while to launch all of those 6 seeds when the crab is shielded up in the air. Also, I found this interesting playthrough by another YouTuber, Miko, who managed to clear with C0 Nilo and Nahida, as well as C6 Barbara and Kali. So if you want to check out how they've defeated difficulty 5 crab with Nilo Bloom team without using Lauma, I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, last one of the trio is the Fatui guy. Sorry, I meant to say Battle Hardened Fireblade Shock Trooper. If you did the world quest inside Kuvaki Experimental Design Bureau, he is kind of the same as the guy you had to fight at the end. Anyway, so this boss basically screams at you, demanding that you bring a powerful electro DPS unit because, well, just look at his resistances table. In regular state, where aside from physical dealing more damage, everything is fine, but once he creates a shield, which will happen immediately at the beginning of the fight, now only electro deals regular damage, while against every other element he gains 70% resistance. I mean, yeah, physical has 40% resistance, but we don't talk about physical damage dealers. Finally, once you get rid of the shield, every elemental resistance drops to minus 40%. However, after the boss recovers and you fight him, he still has minus 50% electro resistance, while others return to normal. In other words, if you want to beat him, bring a strong electro DPS unit. Well, kinda. I'll quickly discuss other options in a moment. Now, I was talking about difficulty 5 and 6 here because at difficulties 1 and 4, his resistance to all elements is the same, so you could bring other DPS units besides Electro. But again, these difficulties are mostly trivial, maybe except for difficulty 4 Menacing, although with a well-invested DPS, you should be able to beat him with a non-Electro DPS unit. Still, let's talk about the biggest mechanic. So, at the start of the fight, he creates a shield dome, which will be around 4.5% of his health, and it will be comprised of 3 layers. Once you break the layer, he receives white damage equal to about 6% of his HP and sends some elemental energy to the team. But the thing is, the shield will keep regenerating, and it will regenerate a lot faster in difficulty 5 and 6. However, you can slow it down if the team triggers lunar charged or electro charged reactions. In fact, these reactions also deal better damage against the shield. So you know what I'm about to say. Make sure the team can trigger either electro charge or lunar charged. Also, and this is very important, while the shield is up, Sacrificial and Favonius weapon passives will not trigger, which is a bummer. But it takes a few seconds at the start of fight to cast the shield, so I was able to trigger at least 2 Favonius or Sacrificial weapons at start of fight to at least quickly gain some energy for my teams. But listen, now I'm actually going to tell you something interesting. You can bring main DPS units other than Electro. For example, Arlecchino Overvape team could work, such as this one, made up of Aino, Innefa, and Benny, as long as Electro Charge or Lunar Charge reactions are popping off, and they will if you follow this rotation. Same goes for Chaska or Mavwika, or heck, if you have a well-invested Skirk team, you should be able to break through the shields. At least it worked on my side, although she's got a couple of constellations. Just remember, if you don't break the 3 shield layers in time, he will summon this disgusting lightning from above that will basically ruin your current fight, and most likely your units will start to die off. However, it is quite interesting that once the shield disappears, a freeze team can basically keep this Fatui guy perma-frozen, so he won't be able to summon another shield if you time the reactions. Now, you could also go for a Nouvellette team with Innefa, Farina, and either Jean or Shenyun, which should be able to defeat him with strong artifacts. But the thing is, Innefa is going to be the one who carries the team hard, thanks to the Lunar Charge dealing so much damage to the shield and slowing down its regeneration. Plus, low resistance means very high Lunar Charge damage. Actually, as long as you have Innefa, you could even go for a free-to-play team comp such as Fischl, Xingqiu, and Sucrose to take down difficulty 5. It definitely works. Point is, Innefa is the MVP against this boss. But what if you don't have Innefa? Well, I've tested a couple of teams and managed to clear difficulty 5 with several Varessa Electrocharge teams. For example, Varessa with Shenyun, Farina, and Fischl worked pretty nicely, although you could also go for Iansan instead of Fischl and Shilonen instead of Shenyun. Actually, you could even destroy all 3 layers of the shield with Overloaded Chevy team by using Varessa, or you could try your luck with Clorand or Yaimiko. But you really need to make sure your main Electro DPS can deliver a ton of damage quickly to the shield because it will keep regenerating very fast without Electro Charge or Lunar Charge reactions thrown at it. But remember, even if you don't have Innefa who can cause Lunar Charge, bringing Hydro and Electro unit to trigger Electro Charge is still good enough since it delays the regeneration of the shield and deals more damage than usual. Overall, I feel like this Luna 1 iteration of Stygian Onslaught is the most difficult so far, especially the Fatui guy on dire difficulty. Although, it's pretty clear that Lauma is extremely good against the Crab, while Innefa, and most likely once Flins is released, they are the best against the Fatui guy. As for the Drake, I'd say Mavwika, Mulani, Chaska, Navia, and Knich are super solid when it comes to dealing distributed damage together. Here's my list of units I would suggest using against each boss. Just keep in mind, this is day 1 first impressions guide I created. I'm sure as more time passes, more and more people in the community will find better teams and rotations. As for dire difficulty, I'm not certain if I can beat it myself, to be honest, but if I did while I'm writing this script, I will now show the teams I've used to clear the bosses. I do suspect that Flins will be insanely good against dire difficulty Fatui, because this boss has a ton of HP at this level, and my account is pretty much made up of just C0 R1 or C2 units, only Mavwika is C6. Anyway, enough with the rambling. We're almost at 400,000 subscribers. I'd really appreciate it if you could press the subscribe button to make me feel better about a big number. Don't forget to smash the like button as well. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.